for joining. Everyone had a little bit of coffee this morning and breakfast. I'm still waking up a little bit, but I've had coffee, so I think it's kicking in. Um, I'm excited, also surprised that this session got accepted because almost every session is about AI nowadays and Copilot. So absolutely happy to discuss that. The reason I submitted this session, the reason I want to talk about it was all the conversations we're having with customers, about 90% of them are, hey, can AI do this? Can Copilot do this? The answer is usually yes, right? As technologists, as IT folks, we're like, yes, it's possible. And then you look at their data policies, you look at the data governance, you look at how their content is, and then people get scared. Customers get scared about our content's not secure, it's not well governed, it's not well managed, and how do we control and manage that? Excited to kind of go through this, but I really want to make sure, as I've got slides, the slides will be available for download later. I've got a QR code if you want to reach out as well for those slides and anything else you need. But I want to make sure for each of you, as you're thinking about your environment, your role, your scenario, if there's something that doesn't, that's just top of mind for you that you want to make sure you cover, please just speak up, interrupt, raise your hand, yell, whatever you need to. We can switch between slides as well. So I don't want to be up here and just present for an hour and then walk away. I want to make sure you guys get some benefit. The opportunity. I've been fortunate enough to present at CommsView Next quite a few times. Love the attendees and the networking, but also, obviously the sponsors are there. So make sure you check out the sponsors. More importantly, it's always good, I think, even if you have a solution in place, I always like to go to the booths to understand what they're doing, even if we've got something already or already got some established practices in place. It's really nice to talk to people that are passionate about the technology as well. So network as much as you can, whether people in this session or outside of this session, learn from each other. My name's Kanwal. I've been fortunate to be a CEO founder at Attitude Lead. We're M365 focused consulting company. Started with SharePoint Teams, our platform, last about 3 years, predominantly on Copilot Studio, and Azure AI Foundry. So we do a lot of work on building custom Copilots and agents and solutions, but I would say that's about 10% of our revenue. People predominantly come to us for kind of, hey, can you help guide us towards an AI strategy? Can you help us drive the right governance policies in place? And what they already have. I'm looking forward to kind of going through a few things with you guys. Probably the best thing that you can think about in your environment is have a space, an area as administrator, as an operator, IT pro, a simple kind of list or a way to see all the SharePoint sites, all the Teams environments, and eventually all the Copilot agents that you have. Only as as an administrator, you want that access and that ability and that insight, and be able to group workspaces together and be able to run some bulk, operations on them as well. So this is kind of like the end state of what you're trying to get to, is a single workspace that gives you that insight. Today, you've got some of that in SharePoint administration portal. You got some of that in the Teams admin portal. You've got them in kind of scattered places, but there's not a kind of a consolidated portal that gives you access to all these content spaces and how to apply security to them, how to operate them, how to archive them. So on our side, we've been fortunate to build solutions like this, and we've got products and kind of accelerators in place, both source code, open source code, as well as IP that we built. So if you're ever interested in looking at what that looks like, tons on GitHub and tons of solutions that we can share as well with you guys. But this is what you want to try to get work towards within your organizations, is a central pane of glass that allows you to guide your environment. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is captured in this ebook as well. So if you're interested in downloading that, the URL is just m365sprawl.com. Today, SharePoint Teams, and we will be in the next quarter updating it for Copilot agents as well. Microsoft and the PowerCat team have finally made huge improvements in how agents are governed. APIs are available. Some of the out-of-the-box reports are available. So we'll be updating this to help you manage agents and those workspaces as well. Now, I think reality is content just grows over time, right? Over time, you have tons of different Internet portal, daunting. Most companies don't have hundreds of team sites or SharePoint sites. They have thousands. Some even have tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. So what you got to look at on your end is if you're managing an environment and trying to understand sprawl, is what are some of those controls in place and how do you optimize some of those controls as well in place. And on the administrator side, that's great, but on the end user side, it becomes even more challenging. The out of the box experiences are great in terms of for those that have hundreds of sites, hundreds of teams. But this is just an example. Let's say when you go to Teams and you search for the word sales, this is just an art. We're a small company. We're about 25 employees. And we have too many sales teams and other kind of sites that when we search for that, it becomes a little bit overwhelming for especially new employees that get onboarded. And I can only imagine, with the customers that we work with, when it is a number of like tens and thousands of employees as well. How many of you have access to the Teams admin portal? Awesome. And how about the SharePoint admin portal? And I would take it with most of you having putting your hands up. Most of you are like IT pros, but administrators within your tenants and managing. Awesome. Before I continue here, what's like the biggest challenge you're facing today on the governance sprawl side? You want to share? There's no governance at all. And how big is your company in terms of? Just gotten out of control with 130. Yeah. And there's no governance. Kind of tackle it now. Okay. Of chaos. Yeah. Absolutely. Anybody else? They didn't. Oh my God. So you got 50,000 locations, you were saying? 1,000 locations. And then how many people with that are in the productivity information worker space? No teams. Are you guys using like Cisco or some other tools or? Oh, okay. Yeah. And how about for document management? Where do people store? uh, okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Not that Box is bad, but yeah, we help a number of customers migrate. Like one of our biggest customer migrations for Box is like 150 terabytes of data. Now they, oh really? And they wanted to move all the content. We're like, it doesn't make sense to move all the content. There's some content that should stay in Box for, X reasons, and some of that should move, and others shouldn't go to SharePoint. It should go to Azure or some other platform. So, um, oh, yeah, awesome. How about yourself? Yes, crazy. Yeah, exactly. There's a huge disconnect. I absolutely agree with you. And it's always interesting because sometimes the admin has more control or more visibility. Sorry, in some ways that's good in terms of visibility, But those same controls for governing and managing, administrating, you could still bring some of that over without, if the person doesn't have access, but make it a little bit more accessible. So I agree. I think there is kind of some of what I've realized working with Microsoft closely, the product managers, is there's, let's say if we're just Copilot Studio, there's 10,000 employees. But if you look at Teams, there's thousands and thousands of employees. And they're just groups of 3 or 4 team members that are working on a specific feature. So now you've got like hundreds of these little mini groups. It's hard for them to all to be on the same page, and in terms of priorities, in terms of how they build things. So yeah, just the governance piece. I agree with that. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. Which part? Oh, for yes, yeah, on the Azure side. Yeah, Entra. Sorry. Yeah, it definitely feels disconnected. No, I agree. I think that's a challenge. So, 100 employees or thousands of employees, we're all kind of feeling the same, even for a company of 30 employees or less, 25 or less. It's like, how do you put in some principles in place that give you that kind of guiding principle going forward? Because features will keep coming, UI will change, you might get scripts, you might maybe purchase a product, whatever it might be. But what are those guiding principles? So I just kind of recommend, as we're kind of thinking about this, exactly what you guys were saying earlier, it's not just on the team side, but it's across the different services and applications. Now, the great part about Teams being group enabled does mean that all the other services, somehow you can control governance around those. So you do want to encourage more teams and people to drive teams today, because it allows you to then come back and say, if I want to govern all these other applications that are associated to it, I just need to focus on the groups part. We see a lot of examples where customers are encouraging SharePoint sites or people engaged communities or etc. And really trying to encourage, okay, that's all good, but try to bring the management and the governance and security to the 365 group or the Azure Entra AD groups. Um, all right. So yeah, if you're not doing that, unmanaged provisioning is going to be a challenge. I think most of you guys know most of this. So you want to work towards managed provisioning as much as possible. This slide here is kind of all the things you need to consider, and kind of becomes your checklist for governance. It doesn't include everything, but it's a really good starting point. So if you're looking at, let's say, ineffective naming, go through a few of these. If you're looking at ineffective naming, if you don't manage Sprawl for ineffective naming, you've got unclear purpose of workspace focus. You don't know if that content, that site, that group is official or unofficial. For example, classic kind of example with groups and teams is you can create today a group in your organization called CEO or sales, and immediately gives you that email, CEO at your company, sales at your company. And now that email address, people can then email that and assume that they're talking to the CEO, talking to sales, talking to marketing, or invoices or payments or whatever, from a risk point of view. That kind of control giving to your employees, you want to manage that well, right? There's certain things that should be official, names that you're allowed to use, and others you're allowed to use. And then, of course, you cannot. The other thing with naming conventions, when you kind of look at this long list, you can't differentiate what those groups are, right? From the names to the emails, it's hard as an administrator to really know. When you don't know, what you got to do is reach out to the owner of the group or the members, and then hoping they give you a little bit more context so you can manage that kind of rule and apply a rule elsewhere. And then inappropriate name usage as well. That's the other big challenge, like I was mentioning earlier. Another big concern is owners are missing. So if you've got owners, let's say for a team, one of the biggest challenges is not having a team that has 10 members, 20 members. Make sure there's at least 2 owners to that. Cool. Owner of 10 groups, and you just, or 100 groups or 1,000 groups, just don't have that time to manage and oversee those. So if an owner is not overseeing the content, overseeing who's part of that membership, that group, then it makes it a little bit more harder for you to kind of reach out to those owners and say, hey, can you help me manage this a little bit better? So it's really, really important. Making sure you don't run into kind of lack of accountability and inability to get scale. Redundant team sites or sites, decrease user confidence, more confusion, and probably the biggest thing I would just highlight is just increased cost of support. You're not managing sprawl, you're spending more time. That's the biggest challenge. You're not controlling the sprawl, you're managing more time, spending more time. And then the other big risk is data loss. Content's being stored in your team, and what if a new owner gets added and they decide, hey, we don't need this team anymore, they go ahead and delete it. And, there's a 30-day retention, right? Teams and etc. go into recycle bin, and then from the 30 days, I think it's another 30 days, so you got 60 days, but you're busy, right? And you've got so many teams to manage. You haven't had a chance for the last 3 months to look at deleted sites, and now it's completely removed. And then somebody reaches out to you 6 months later and is like, I needed access to that content, right? So you want to manage that data risk as much as possible. All right, so part of this through kind of these 4 main areas, and I just go through some recommendations. And there's a lot of solutions out there. I'm happy to talk about specific solutions, happy to talk about products you can purchase, solutions that are in place, and of course, AI. I'm trying really hard not to mention it too much because if you're an organization who's adopting AI, fantastic. Just raise your hand, ask about, hey, Kanwal, we've got Copilot. What do we do? We want a Copilot or AI first approach. What do we do? Happy to talk about that. And I'm going to be creating and writing. I've gotten a lot of content on it as well. But just wanted this to be a little bit more focused on foundation for those that aren't even ready for that discussion yet. All right. Biggest way to think about governance, biggest way to think about this is that it's like a football team, right? Or any sports team. Your role might be quarterback, right? And your role might be very specific to a certain thing that you're doing, but you need others to support you. You can't do this alone. You have to make sure that you're treating this like a team game rather than it's my job, it's my responsibility, and it's only on my shoulders. Really, really important because I think a lot of us end up feeling overwhelmed, overloaded, and not sure where to start. And it's not that you've got the keys to manage and admin, great, but you also need peers and champions and those around you. Besides leadership, you need some of those that are active users or that are constantly being using the tools a little bit. In terms of planning for successful migration as well, people do get stuck in policies. And this is very common when large organizations have compliance teams or legal. When we're experts at something, we get stuck. The policy has to be perfect. And because it gets stuck, nothing gets implemented. And it's hard. I'm a perfectionist. I OCD on information architecture and security, and I do quite a bit of that. But a lot of times, sometimes you got to frame it differently, and you got to just think about, okay, we got to execute, we got to move forward. Let's try this policy. It's 80% or 60% where we need to be, and then let's keep iterating and improving on it. What this allows you to do really is it allows you to, one, we talked about that team a little bit, having a team in place, but how to handle exceptions. How do you handle when things hit the fan? You're like, oh, shit. We've got a data loss. Data has been lost. How do we kind of get back? The owner isn't in the company anymore. How do we handle that? Right. So use the teams as a way to connect every quarter, every month, every 2 weeks escalations that are coming up, so everybody has a clear idea of how to escalate and how to resolve that issue instead of trying to be perfect from day one. So just very quickly, that's the best way to be efficient. Have a team and focus on efficiency and execution. All right, next up is approaches and processes. So out of the box, there is a provisioning experience that you have that allows you to create sites, which is great. However, as you are, let's say, 500 employees or more, generally, if you've got a kind of a okay management and governance of your teams and sites, you then want to manage this out of the box. Now, what you're seeing, of course, is even companies as small as 50 employees want to manage how sites get created, right? You can immediately find ways. Now, out of the box, there's this ability to apply site templates. So let's say you're an organization of 100, 200 employees, 50 employees, whatever. And you're like, how do we control this? So number one, in the SharePoint space and the team space, you can create templates for those sites. And for the existing sites, you can reach out to the site owners and say, and you can do this through PowerShell too, but you can go to the site owners, encourage you to reach out to the site owners and say, go to your SharePoint space and apply the site template. And what the site template has is, besides like if you wanted to have a home page or you wanted to have some consistent look and feel, consistent navigation, consistent IA, more importantly, that site template can include security and policies around how you want to govern that data. Right? And what you're getting is you're getting the site owners involved as part of that application process of applying that site template. So both Teams as well as SharePoint, you can create a number of these templates. And for the site owners, usually giving them a landing page a little bit customized or a little bit unique to what their needs are, or grouping of needs. Let's say you have departmental sites, departmental teams, and you're like, let's create a department template. And let's have specific things that are relevant to a department, like a department lead, with department tasks, department resources, department news, and deploy that. But as part of that, you also put in governance policies as well that get applied based on the site template. Any questions on this? Yes. Yeah, because the hardest part usually is we can do it for new sites, and then existing sites you can do that as well as for teams. So really, really important that I would encourage. And then of course, part of the site template, there are a number of governance related things that you can start applying. So there are things that administrator, IT pro, which is probably things like, should we enable external sharing for this site? For example, departmental sites, should they have external sharing enabled? Whether the answer is yes for you or no to you, you can set that setting in the site template, and as the site owners apply it, it gets applied to that site. Reduces oversharing, which in the Copilot world, AI world, you want less of. And then the other thing is you can trigger a Power Automate flow. So endless possibilities there, but you can kick off other processes for each of those sites. So if you've got a list of sites and you're like, it's great on the SharePoint admin portal or the Teams portal, admin portal, I've got access to all the teams and all that, but I also want to create and enable, let's say HR, legal, other people that are part of your governance team, a listing of all those sites without giving them Teams admin privileges. Then you can have a Power Automate that goes and updates a SharePoint list or a Dataverse list, the site name, the URL, whatever information you want to capture, that gets populated as those site templates get applied. So that's one way to kind of start in. I don't know. Implement purview and security is then find ways to enable and add in metadata to your sites, to your documents. Right? So for example, one common metadata for every organization usually is department, right? So even though departmental content gets stored in the departmental site, department column, free department document, but also non-departmental content include a column called department in there. So if somebody's uploading content to the HR department, you can have that column, that metadata column, automatically say equal HR, right? So the default's already in place, and as people are uploading it, you're leveraging metadata. It gets your end users, gets your site owners understanding the benefit of metadata, and then now based on that, you can also start applying some rules around it as well. In a list, uh, voices, and you're like, we really like to have a, a sensitivity label policy that invoices are only applicable to finance. That means if I'm part of HR or I'm the CEO or whatever, there's some rules around I can't access invoices. We can apply metadata to that library and those files to say this is an invoice and then restrict that content. So even when somebody takes that invoice, downloads it to their OneDrive, or finance library to the HR, purview is you can, with Purview, define those rules. Is it for all documents, or is it for only those documents that have this metadata applied? Right. So this is really thinking through on your end for documents what you want to do, and of course you can level this up. You can also do it at the container level for the sites, for the team sites as well as the SharePoint sites. You can have metadata there as well. Right. So it's either a grassroots approach. You look at documents and apply metadata to drive your governance, your security, your kind of management there, or look at the container level and say, you know what, all the departmental sites are going to have this metadata, which is department. And we're going to apply that. And then now when we set up security in the future to control no external sharing, or this content can't be downloaded, can't be shared externally, then you can apply that Purview policy there as well. You guys all aware of Purview, have experience in Purview a little bit? This is what it's all building up to, right? So usually anybody wants to leverage AI, Copilot, anything of that sort, you want to make sure the data that you're searching and querying is applicable only to that person, restricted to them. They're the only ones who have access to it. And that's what Copilot is responding back to. For that to be governed, you need to have Purview in place. And I should have probably had a slide on this. You'd have to have Purview in place, and Purview controls the security above and beyond your SharePoint permissions or your Teams permissions, controls the data. And you can apply it at the container level, and you can also apply it at the document level. The reality is that probably the best way to apply it is start at a foundation on the container level, but very quickly move to the document level. The reason you want to move very quickly is at the container level, you're going to define as an organization the very basic principles, what you want in Purview. Here are the sensitivity labels that we want, usually like 3 or 5 or 7 max that you have as an organization. And now you can take those policies and then share those with the site owners or start applying them to their documents as well. All right, so we've talked about provisioning, we've talked about metadata, and then of course, then there's tons of applications out there that can manage out beyond what out-of-the-box provisioning provides. There's Teams-based solutions that are available on GitHub. There's Power App-based solutions that are available on GitHub as well. How many of you today are leveraging custom kind of solutions? Yeah. Highly encourage it, because it allows you to then control, how your content gets provisioned. Also allows you to put approvals around that. Also allows you to give that tool ideally to your employees and say, and you can restrict it to who gets access, but you could, empower your employees to ask those requests so that you're not manually creating. So if you're today either manually creating those sites, right, because you restricted, controlled who provisions, or it's kind of a free-for-all or restricted even, you're kind of swimming uphill, right? That sprawl is going to continue to expand, and it's not something you can govern and control. Overseeing that creation process also allows you to manage that governance and that sprawl as well. Now, I'm sure being technologists, we know anything that's free doesn't necessarily mean it's low effort. So there's solutions on GitHub that do this. Some of them work out of the box. Some of them are not production ready. You can leverage those. We built some. There's products out there as well. So you have to gauge on your end which solutions you want to leverage. If you ever need some of that guidance, feel free to reach out on that as well. Because depending on your company size and what you're trying to tackle, there's some really good third-party products for enterprise customers, and there's some really good products that are for companies that are less than 500 employees. And there's some really custom or low-cost ones that you can own the source code for, and then own going out once it's deployed as well. Of course, Power Platform, Teams apps are a big way. On the SharePoint side, you can also build in experiences for provisioning as well. There's lots of options for creating, provisioning. These are kind of all the components that tie into a solution. Again, you're trying to manage the life cycle of applications or solutions or containers or sites or teams. And that's what you want to try to control and have some good around it. There's, of course, I think I had this slide earlier, but post-provisioning, if you're trying to, after post-provisioning, apply the site template, that's okay too. But it's a short-term gap for the ones that are in place and existing. I think a lot of the, I think this is an older slide, so I'm going to skip this. A lot of changes. If you are your end, that provisioning and life cycle of it, one of the best things to do, and you don't have to do this manually anymore. There's tons of AI solutions that say, hey, create me a diagram for our provisioning process. You can also take this and be like, okay, here are users, here's our governance board, here's our operations team. What are the responsibilities for each one? Now, for most of you, probably all this is manual, right? So you don't have to replace all this with a solution. Sometimes what you can do, and of course, this is where AI comes in, this is where solutions come in. You can take parts, one of them, two of them, build a little bit of customization or scripting or Power Automate to automate that piece as well. So best thing always, map out the activities. Now you've got a good sense of what the process is, and you can start tackling one by one if you wanted to implement that in place. All right, some of this stuff, examples of kind of stuff that we can and encourage you guys. Next up is lifecycle opportunities. This is kind of an example of things that you want to lifecycle. You want to think about expiration and archiving policies. You want to see if they need to be targeted only at the site collection level, or do you want them to be multi-staged? You also want to look at duplication detection and reduction as well. Often we see any company that has like thousands of sites, a lot of sites that are kind of serving the same purpose, right? And half of the time they're abandoned, and other times you've just got different groups doing their thing, but they're kind of lost. So, and usually what that means is they're also sharing links with each other, or they're sharing attachments with each other, but two different teams that should just be in one team itself. We talked a little bit about the owner gap escalation. External sharing review is really important because you don't want all your content to be externally available and accessible. From a governance point of view, you also want to do permission review and security assessments. Those are really important. And then compliance and sensitivity review. So if you don't have purview in place, and by the way, you need E5 for purview. Of course, E5 gives you a lot of that capability. If you have E3 today or E1, you can get a purview add-on. Sometimes it's cheaper than buying E5 for everybody. So that's another kind of consideration from a licensing point of view. Expiration and archiving policies, you want to see what teams are associated to SharePoint sites. And a lot of times what you'll find is people will create a team, but they'll never use the team interface with the tabs. They'll just go directly to the SharePoint site. So sometimes it's good to know when something should be Teams first and when something should be SharePoint first. Because most probably they're using SharePoint because they're not using all the plumbing behind the scenes of the group's experience. Sometimes that's a good thing. Other times they've got their own SharePoint space, and then they're like, oh, created a Power BI workspace, which has its own as well. Like, why don't we kind of combine those and consolidate those a little bit together? One of the best things you can do, of course, is this is just an example of an email you can put together. Of course, with GPT and all that stuff, you can put that really quickly. But educating site owners and reaching out to site owners is really, really important because they're also just like you guys. They've got a lot on their plate, and the last thing they want to do is like, what do I need to do to better manage my site, better, as an owner of this team or the owner of the SharePoint site. So putting an email or some sort of communication together. Can you check this? Can you check this? If you're not using this, share that back. It just allows you to then build some of that kind of that team glue champions who are like, you know what, I got to make sure my admins are also, I'm not putting more on their plate and making it a little bit more challenging for them. Skip this one. I'll do a quick demo of, how many of you are familiar with SharePoint Advanced Management, Sam? Okay, do a quick demo of this. If today you have even one Copilot license, SharePoint Advanced Management is free. No, it's already there. It's already built in. That's if you have Copilot. Now, if you don't, then the whole what you can do if you don't have Copilot licenses, there's a pay-as-you-go Azure subscription that you sign up, and then as you use it, you can leverage it. All right, that's the license stuff. Most companies have Copilot or at least one license, and that allows you to kind of pay for SharePoint Advanced Management. Now, if you're in the SharePoint space, zoom in here, anything that has like the word Pro next to it, that's what SharePoint Advanced Management is. It gives you a little bit more granularity and reporting capability and governance reports. That's all it's doing. It's all the PowerShell scripts that you would create. It just has an interface to them, and it provides those reports to you. So some good features there that you can take advantage of. And here, what I'll just show you is in the site lifecycle management that you see there, there's two reports. There's inactive site policies, and there's also site ownership policies as well. So you can create policies, and you can define those policies how you'd like. We'll just go through a quick creation walkthrough as well. So you're essentially trying to request from SharePoint Advanced Management, Sam. You're trying to request, hey, Sam, give me an inactive report for sites, and here's the rules around it. All right. How long after the last activity should a site be considered inactive? The modified by date for documents or content. If that's 3 months, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you can provide that there and say, okay, the last month have not been active. Might be too much. You could look at a 6-month policy. Cool. Next up, what sites should be checked for inactivity? Now, classic sites, communication sites, group connected, team sites, team connected. These are all the different variations of the site templates that are there. For example, what you might find is your communication sites are your intranet, and it's okay if it's inactive because it's with the HR or corp comm team for whatever reason. So you can say, don't check these. Or you can do an initial review. And if you have sensitivity labels defined, you can also filter by sensitivity label, filter by source, as well as include site retention policies and holds. So if a site already has policies and holds and it has been inactive for 6 months, maybe it doesn't need to exist anymore. And you can also exclude some sites from this policy as well. So you can be very specific and say, hey, here's all the up to 100 sites you can include. Say, hey, that CEO's blog, don't worry about it. Right? HR site, don't worry about it. Like you have a list of up to 100 sites. You can say, just I don't want those in the list. All right. And then who should be notified? Now, this is great. So SharePoint space, there's site owners and there's site collection administrators, right? So generally, if you're an IT pro, you're the admin, the site collection admin. You don't show up as a site owner. However, you might want to not only notify yourself that those emails are going out, or you can also have it where it goes to the site owners. So that's up to you. And then the other part is what do you want to do if the site has been inactive? So you can take enforcement. You can make the site read-only, which means site's been inactive for 3 months, 6 months. Just make it read-only. Let's see if anybody notices. Right? Or with SAM, SharePoint Advanced Management, you have the ability to archive sites as well, which means it takes you away from that SharePoint admin portal, the active sites, makes it archived. If you're managing costs at your organization, SharePoint incurs some costs from a storage point of view as you upload content. Let's say you have 100 gigs on a site. You're like, nobody's using it. It's been inactive. We still want to keep the data because, some teams keep it. You can archive that content. The archival content cost is 1/10 of the cost that you would have for storage of your tenant. So that gets reduced. And just, I think 2 weeks ago, they announced before, when you put into cold storage and you wanted to retrieve that content back, you got charged for bringing it back from cold storage. They waived that fee now. So there's no cost to bringing it back. So you can, at will, bring it back, archive it, bring it back, at will, and not worry about cost, besides the cold storage cost that you're going to have in there. Something, it gets removed from index, search wording. It gets removed from Copilot because you've archived the site. It's not relevant for active content. Copilot is on active content. And then as it's an archive, it's essentially in read-only period as well. So you can also define that. And that's it. And then you can put in the policy name. And there's 2 modes here. Simulation active. Exactly what they say. Active automatically goes through if you have like a policy to say, move this to archive. For sites, you'll start doing that. Or if you just want to do a simulation, just try this out. Because you don't want to bug anybody. You're just like trying to learn about the policy, see if it makes sense or not. Run a simulation and have a look at the report. Questions? Make sense? Last thing I'll just demo here. No activity in 6 months. Again, we're a small company. We have over 300 sites that are inactive, right? And as I think I'm owner for most of them because I end up creating a lot of sites as we get customers and projects and whatever. It emails me. I had like 100 emails in my inbox. I'm like, I gotta certify this site. I gotta certify this site. So I haven't certified all of them. It's okay. Next month when it emails me, I'll certify a few more. You can look at the scope. You can look at the configuration. Just recently, besides deactivate, you can download the report, which is a CSV of all the URLs. You can also get AI insights. So if I click on this, it gives me insights for the sites. So instead of downloading that Excel with 300 plus sites, like just give me the AI insights, like running through Copilot and saying, hey, by the way, you got sites with significant storage usage. I ran this morning. So we did a project with GSK. We did a project with Miami Heat, one of the cruise ship lines, and we had 22 gigs of data. Like, oh, right. We had that. I'm going to archive those sites after today's session and just save our tenant 22 gigs of data. So that's great. Sites that have been inactive for over a year, there's a couple sites there. Sites with the same site owner. I'm the site owner for a lot of them. So again, you can run simulation mode, a report. You could either look at it yourself or run through AI insights and just something. You're starting with something and saying, what do we do here? Right? Without applying any policy that's in place. So that's a inactive site policy, and there's a site ownership policy as well. One of the rules around site ownership that's good is, you got the same, when you're creating this policy, you got the same, like, do you want to apply the policy scope to all the sites? Sure. And then filters are there just as before. You can exclude sites. That's great. And then here's what's the important part, site owners or admins. As an organization, sometimes it's minimum required that you have 2 owners, right? Large org, somebody leaves, what do you do with that content? So if a site it finds it doesn't have 2 owners, it'll remind you. It'll give you an email and say, by the way, the site doesn't have 2 owners. So simple governance pieces in place that are there. If you have Copilot already, SAM is free, included in there as well. Who should be notified? Again, you can email the site owners, you can email the site admins, you can even email the site members. Like, hey, is this site active? And now 10 people get that email. And they can say yes or no, and it comes back to you as a notification. What do you need to do? And of course, if sites don't have two owners, you can say, make that site read-only. And again, simulation mode, active mode. So pretty cool. Saves us from a lot of PowerShell scripts. Sam does a good job with some of those basic reports that are available out of the box, with a little bit of paid license. For in terms of policies, right? It's whatever gets kicked off first. But yeah, they're different products, different teams. All right. Functional governance, 3 things you can also take away. Leverage, as you're mentioning, Azure ADs, group expiration, Entra ADs, policies that are there. Really helpful. I think I've highlighted before, implement sensitivity labels is another good one. If you feel like you've got a good control over your teams and sites, sensitivity labels, and I've got content on YouTube as well as lots of around as well. If you're interested in just getting a little bit more informed, feel free to reach out. And then enforce clear naming conventions. So when you're creating a team, you know how you can specify the name, and they use that name as the URL or the group ID or SharePoint site, so you can kind of control what that is for people, so that when you're looking at it as admin, it's a little bit more clear. So the name, let's say HR onboarding team, you can kind of put a policy in place and say all the teams leverage this policy going forward. Now, it's one thing to say it, and like I was mentioning, if you're using out-of-the-box experiences, there's no guarantee somebody's going to follow this pattern, this naming convention. However, if you've got your own tool or script or product or whatever, then you can control that pattern, right? That's the benefit and power of that, where you're leaving less and less to individuals to kind of think about that, and instead you're guiding them and managing that process. All right, sustain and maintain directory experiences. I think just in the interest of time, I think just highlight, we talked a little bit about at the beginning of content continues to grow, whether you're a small company or large, it's a lot to handle. And what you can't keep doing is leaning on what's available out of the box to support your day-to-day. Life is moving fast, and it's much better for you to have tools that you can rely on that do that work and reduce some of the manual work you're doing. I encourage it. A couple you can do as well. Out of the box navigation for smaller customers, you can leverage navigation from a experience point of view, which really helps people navigate between the workspaces. And the nice thing about navigation also is you can then group them by certain categories, right? So sometimes you don't have the ability to buy a tool, you want to build an experience. So this is an example. I think this is, we did work for NTT. They were consulting, a large consulting firm, and we built their intranet. So tools for the web, support functions, they didn't have the budget to create a directory experience. And they're like, hey, to lead, can you create an experience that helps our intranet owners, users, employees, as well as our administrators? So their administrators said, hey, we want a grouping of all the tools that's accessible. This menu they can configure themselves, but they were able to have like a cascading menu, a directory of all the tools and the resources and the sites in that navigation experience. So more than one way to kind of tackle that. This experience is kind of changing, so I'm going to skip over the SharePoint Home. There is this app bar experience here. I've been a SharePoint and Power Platform MVP for about 15 years. So Microsoft makes a lot of promises, and sometimes they don't deliver. One of the ones that I'm big on user experience on my end of how people use technology. When Microsoft came out with this app bar, they committed to the MVPs that this would be customized, and it's been 5 years. And now if you don't start with the word Copilot, they don't want to hear it. So if you're leveraging the out-of-the-box functionality and you don't have funding for it, this app bar is really run out of ways to kind of manage and control that experience. So if you're not using it today, one of the things I always encourage is leverage what's available out of the box first. And then if you hit that limit where out of the box isn't customizable, then for sure, build or buy. All right. Do any of you guys use Viva Connections in your organization? RSM, anybody else? Yeah. Viva Connections is on the SharePoint side. It's a Teams app. And it's just a good experience that allows you to kind of provides both a mobile app experience as well for your frontline workers and others who can access their content. And one of the guidance that we provide is how to take what Microsoft provides you, like Viva Connections app, and how you can customize that, configure that as well. So, all right, I think that's it. This is just, I think, that screenshot again around the solutions we build. Again, ways to tackle it, but what you're looking for is policies and quick ways to apply those policies. That's what you want to try to look at. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys attending. I'll leave you guys with these kind of 5 governance recommendations. Number 1, use document level sensitivity risks. That's the biggest takeaway I want to make sure that you want to work towards. Document level sensitivity labels, really, really important. You want to proactively manage oversharing. SharePoint Advanced Management, site template. There's a whole review. You can also get insights on content being you. So make sure you find a better way to handle that oversharing challenge and risk. And the reason I just want to highlight this, why oversharing is so popular. If you had access, let's say, to HR site as an example, as an employee, and you were able to search for it, you have to be really good as a search to search something and get content that you didn't have access to. For example, payroll data, right? Who wants to see payroll data for all employees? Usually we kind of don't want to see that. Let's say you had access to it, but you never knew. You try to search for it, and search results never gave you that payroll data from the finance team or the HR team. Whereas with Copilot, you're leaving a lot of that imagination to Copilot, and Copilot now will reason through a lot of that content. And we've seen a lot of examples where with search and oversharing wasn't a huge impact, but with Copilot, it's a huge impact. So oversharing and security is like number 1 priority for organizations. And this is what you want to try to get a better handle of managing. Number 3, driving adoption as a team. Or don't do it on your own team and get feedback. And probably the biggest thing is like just learning together, right? You're not going to have all the answers. It's okay if you have God mode. It doesn't mean you're God and you know everything. It's just you have access to it. And you want a little bit of that guidance from others. Leverage automation tools for onboarding, for training, for any of these things. Try not to do these things yourself and manually. And then the thing about governance, right? Like policies and champions, like we talked at the beginning about the group example, Microsoft 365 groups, governance is about a framework. And you can start at the team point, at the team space. You can start at the SharePoint space, start at Power, start wherever. But the same policies and the champions that you have, try to expand that so it can apply across the board and use that as a framework rather than trying to be unique for each service that's in your tenant. Or else it gets really, really overwhelming really, really quick. That's it. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time, guys.